All right.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Curriculum and Student Success Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Monday, August 25th, 2025. I am the committee chair, Julianne Opperman, and we are meeting online via Zoom. We have an extensive agenda, including review of current academic data, progress in our strategic plan with the mission measures, focus on the progress in English language arts and English in elementary and middle schools, as well as plans and updates on math teaching K-12 and presentation of the Power School dashboard to track academic performance. And as time permits, we will be looking at the portrait of a graduate again. So with that, I will introduce you, Sarah Ali, who is member of the board, and Caroline O'Brien, who is a member of the board, and Zach Lee, who is also a member of the board. Thank you. And Cheryl, if you want to introduce your people.
Yes, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And um, for the PPS team that will be participating in our committee meeting and presenting some really valuable information, we have Angela Atkinson Duena. We also have Abdullahi Ahmed. We have Jesse Applegate, Allison Dame, and we also have um, Haley. Haley, that's really great. Your name is showing as Cheryl Proctor, so we'll talk about that later. But welcome, Haley. I'm not sure how that happened. So happy to have everyone here. And if should I continue, or should I turn it back over to you?
If you have your, oh, no, we do need to check to see, is there anyone who might want be in attendees?
Maya
And
is.
Maya, she has her hand up. I think she would like to come on board. If you can you bring her over, Cheryl, from the attendees?
Yep, give me one moment. Trying to,
Super.
not able to see that. Give me just a moment. Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason I ask, she's the only person in the attendee and column, so I do not see anyone
Are
who.
you able to bring her in?
Uh,
Is that someone that I'm looking to bring in?
um, you're
I
what
got it.
you
Thank
got
you.
it. You got it. Good.
I can, would you like me to help bring her over?
Yes, please.
Who is that?
It's Sarah. Hi.
Hi,
Yeah,
Sarah.
if you could help, that'd be great. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Yep.
There she is. Maya, did you have a comment? Are you just going to participate and all? That would be awesome. Okay, well, I don't see anyone else in um, so I'm going to open and close public comment. At this point, um, Dr. Proctor, you may begin your presentation. Hi, Jesse.
Okay.
Hi, Pamela.
All right, great. Give me just a moment to share my screen for the presentation. Uh, okay. So we're going to do a presentation and we're going to cover a number of areas. Thank you so much again for everyone from the team who is here. And we're going to really touch bases on, it really buckets down into three key areas, but we're going to look at our strategic plan, data review. We're also going to look at our strategic initiatives, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. We're going to look at reporting structures for academic performance, and then we'll review the portrait of the graduate. We have team members that will be participating, and they'll be sharing various segments of of the slides that will cover the area that they are working on particularly. So we'll start now with the data review. And so we have, committed to implementing high quality instructional materials to review to a curriculum review cycle and to use data for improvement and public accountability. And so there are key strategies that we're focused on, high quality instructional materials, which is common across schools, curriculum review cycles, using data for improvement, as was stated before, and then aligning for um, the future, for now and for the future, and looking specifically at the portrait of a PPS graduate and the portrait of a PPS school community. So those are the strategies that we're talking about tonight are really grounded in these four areas. And for the data review, we'll have Haley share a few slides with us.
Great. Um, so when we talk about academic data, there are a myriad of academic data points that we could be looking at, but it felt important to start with our strategic plan and the mission measures that we are focused on. And so the data point that we want to really focus on is the main through-year assessment, which is our state assessment administered in the fall and spring. And it captures student proficiency in English language arts, ELA, and math. And it's administered in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10. And so it gives us a pretty broad swath of information about students at different levels. So just kind of giving us that grounding. So as we look at the mission measures, we have set targets that are specifically focused on ELA and math proficiency, where we've set an ELA proficiency of 70% of students being proficient or at benchmark or grade level in ELA, and for math, a target of 52%. If you look in the table, you can see sort of our path here since 2022 with our 2022-23 with our baseline data. And so we see we have not yet met those targets as of the 24-25 administration, but we are inching closer on those targets. And another part of our strategic plan really focuses on a gap analysis and looking at the difference in student performance between different student groups, student subgroups. And so at this part of the strategic plan, we also look at sort of variation between students with IEPs and those who do not have IEPs, multilingual learners and non-multilingual learners, economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students. And so looking at sort of the variation in their proficiency for both ELA and math. And so again, you'll sort of see the color coding here, yellow indicating that we are sort of making getting closer to our targets that have been established for those mission measures, but the red indicates that we are further away from that target. So we see that when we actually disaggregate the results, that there are still significant gaps that exist. But so when we look at our proficiency rates across grade bands, breaking them down by elementary, middle, and high, and looking at trends over time, we do see some promising improvements across all 3 grade band areas. And Cheryl, if you want to hit that. So most notably in middle school, seeing a over 5 percentage point increase in proficiency rate. So that certainly is something to celebrate. And I'll say that as a data person, I think this progress is really exciting. We can't say definitively that it is causal, but certainly a promising trend nonetheless. And when we get to math, it's even more exciting when we look particularly at middle and high school math, where we see much more substantial percentage point gains in proficiency rates. And so I think when we look at both of these together, again, seeing overall trends in a positive direction. All right, and so that gives us some grounding for our conversation to understand sort of the big picture metrics that we're driving toward, and I'll hand it off to Jessie, I assume, is the next one up.
Thanks, Haley. My name is Jessie Robinson. I'm the Director of Elementary Academics. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing this year at the elementary level as it relates to academics. So in our strategic plan, we have 2 sort of key initiatives. One is around ELA and one is around math. The one for ELA is we're in our 2nd year of implementing high quality curriculum in grades K through 5. One is called ELELA and the other is CKLA. ELELA is our knowledge building curriculum and CKLA is taught at our primary grades K through 2 and it's focused on foundational skills. So this year we're really deepening our work around ELELA. Last year we focused more on CKLA and this year we're really going to focus on having data meetings at the teacher level, looking at data to adjust instruction and provide early supports to students who need it. We also have a really great professional development series planned that is aligned to our belief that all students can access high quality curriculum and is focused on leveraging high leverage strategies to support multilingual learners. So we're really excited about that. The other part of 2.1 is around math. So we're not launching anything this year with math. We're really taking a step back and reflecting and redesigning our math curriculum program. So we're bringing together a work group of staff members from across the district at the K-5 level with all the roles represented. So teachers, classroom teachers, ESOL teachers, special ed teachers, ed techs, school leaders, district leaders, that will meet once a month to review our math data, look at our current instruction and assessment practices, and come up with a recommendation for a 3-year plan for moving forward with math. Those recommendations will include instructional materials, supplemental materials, practices, assessments, and aligned supports. And we'll be then launching math next year in the 26-27 school year. And with that, I'll turn things over to Allison Dame.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Dame. I'm the Director of Secondary Academics, so Jessie's counterpart in grades 6 all the way reaching up really to Portland Adult Ed. So um, per the strategic plan, our academics will um, also, we are also in launch year 2 of our ELA. So for grades 6, 8, that's our middle school grade span. Similarly to our elementary school counterparts, we're going to deepen the use of that curriculum. And so there's a couple components of that. We've been really focused on what we call intellectual prep, which is teachers' deep knowledge of the curriculum. But now we're excited to move on to really being able to integrate using student data to adjust instruction. And like Jesse touched on, we're also excited about an ongoing cohesive set of PD sessions for teachers that focus on high leverage strategies to support multilingual learners using the supports that are already existing in that curriculum. So again, ELA for our middle school grade span is in a launch year. And then very much aligned with elementary, our math is in reflect and redesign. So our math teachers do have a curriculum, but this is a time to stop, pause, make sure it's the right one. And that includes, again, as Jesse said, instructional materials, supporting materials, assessments, the actual teaching practices we use, and the aligned support. So we will be assembling a representative work group to pause and look at all of that and propose a 3-year plan for aligned materials and supports across all those categories for the next 3 years. Next slide. And then high school is coming online in terms of the strategic plan this year, and we're beginning with math. So very similar to everything I just said about middle school, the key difference being they have not been using an aligned curriculum so far. And so that's why you'll see design instead of redesign. But at the end of the day, the recommendations of the superintendent will include all those same categories for the same length of time, that 3-year span going forward, starting in 26, 27.
Okay, and then we will thank you so much, Allison, Jesse, Haley. And Haley, I'll bring you back up to talk a little bit about reporting structures for academic performance.
Great, thank you. So I spent a lot of time trying to think about what would make sense to share with this committee to sort of orient folks to when we talk about data and reporting structures, what's sort of like the baseline information you need to know to understand how do we measure academic performance. And so I want to just make sure we all have a shared understanding of when we talk about measuring academic performance, what do we actually mean? So the first thing that I think is really important to note, and part of the reason PowerSchool is so exciting for us, is that the data that we capture about academic performance lives in a lot of different places, primarily in Infinite Campus, which is our student information system. So that's where teachers are inputting their grades. And we have a lot of other really important information about students that exists within that system. We also then have a wide range of assessments, everything from the main 3-year assessment, also we call it MAP growth. We don't have to get into why they have 2 names, but we have SATs, we have Access. And so there's a lot of different assessment data that all lives in separate platforms. And so all of those historically have been in disparate places. And so PowerSchool is able to bring all of these different pieces of information into a single point for access. So that is really exciting. And so I think it's just important to name all of those different systems because measuring academic performance can be complicated when you have data in different places. When we talk about measuring academic performance is not one thing. It cannot be distilled to a single data point. And so when we think about the data that's available, it really comes down to what do we care about measuring? So for example, when we think about our mission measures, we're really focused on proficiency, the percent of students that are proficient in ELA and math or are meeting grade level standards. And that provides us, that can be a really helpful metric, especially if you're thinking about a state benchmarked or even nationally benchmarked sample, seeing how our students do relative to their peers, but also understanding are they sort of meeting expectations for where they should be in their academic journey. Another important metric is, and our map growth and part of the main 3-year allows us to capture this, is growth data. And so understanding not only is a student proficient, but also are they making growth over time and are they meeting their growth targets? In order to meet proficiency, a student who may not yet be proficient has to be meeting certain targets in their growth to ever be able to meet that proficiency mark. And so also monitoring growth is really critical for understanding if we are sort of moving the needle, especially for those students who have greater improvement to make. We also talk about gap closure. We talked about that with the mission measures. And so looking at disaggregating our data by subgroups and looking at variation in outcomes between different groups and looking at the distance between 2 different subgroups. And that's an area I think we have a lot of growth to do ahead of us and really have to be deliberate about trying to address that with an equity lens. When we talk about academic performance, it's not just the grades student gets, but also are they completing courses? You know, credit accumulation is an important metric to determine if a student is on their necessary academic journey. And then, you know, expanding that beyond just simple class completion, but are they then eventually graduating from high school and are they on track for their post-secondary path? And so you can also look at metrics, things like college enrollment, persistence, and completion as indicators of the academic preparation that they received in their K-12 schooling. As we look at all of these different data points, so obviously you're seeing there's not only a lot of different types of data and a lot of different ways to look at the data, we can also look at a lot of different grain sizes. And so when we talk about academic performance, we can look at this at the individual classroom level. For teachers who are looking at their own grade books, they can know whether or not a student is progressing academically and if they're sort of mastering the core standards associated with their discipline. You can look at this at the school level. For a principal, they can look at sort of trends across their building. We can look at it as a district, sort of holistically, either in grade bands or across the whole district, across all schools. And then, of course, we also are accountable to the state, and the data team submits quarterly reports to the state, and we do all sorts of state reporting so that the state is also sort of part of the equation when we think about reporting on academic performance. So again, I had this feeling of trying to distill all of the different features of academic performance is quite complex because we have a lot of different measures available to us, and even to create a comprehensive timeline becomes very overwhelming. So this was my best effort to sort of distill kind of the core assessments that we have available to us when we think about academic performance. And then all of these sort of vary by grade, and grade band. And so sort of this is like the high level summary, and I'm sure Jesse and Allison could provide a lot more context here. But so when we think about all the different assessments, we have everything from formative assessments, and you know, we've included some examples of with our IM math curriculum or Desmos cool downs, things like exit tickets, some of that data that teachers are collecting in sort of real time to be able to monitor their students' academic progress. There's a wide range of formative assessments, and I think these vary quite significantly between even content areas as well. We have interim or summative assessments, and so these could range from everything from an end of unit assessment to you know, end of unit curriculum project or culminating project. And then of course, sort of the other type of summative assessment is the state summative assessment. And so when we talk about the main 3-year assessment or the access test, that sort of gives a sort of end of period summary of a student's academic performance. And then we also have other sort of diagnostic tools, things like universal screeners, diagnostic assessments, progress monitoring assessments. And so all of these give a different type of data. And so each of them has a different use. They don't all tell us the same thing. And so ideally, when we look at data, it's important to sort of triangulate different data sources to build a holistic picture of a student's academic performance. And so I sort of alluded to this, but so I think it's also just really important to be clear about sort of broadly defining academic performance. And so it's not just course grades or GPA or performance on a standardized test, but things like participation in advanced coursework that can sort of indicate that students are experiencing rigorous curriculum. Graduation rates, college enrollment persistence completion. And so then the timing of all these, right, things like course grades or GPA data would be depending on the school available at the end of the quarter, semester, or trimester, whereas things like participation in advanced coursework we can report on at the end of the year, graduation rates at the end of the year. So there's also just variation in timelines. So where formative assessment data is sort of available throughout the year, summative assessments really tends to be either at the end of the unit or the end of the year. And so I'm saying all this to say that trying to wrangle these different pieces of information is challenging because you have different information available at different points in time. So, which then, of course, excitingly brings us to the PowerSchool dashboard. So I put in some screenshots just to show off a couple things in the slides, but I'm going to pull up the live dashboard. I won't be able to click into things because it's live with our real data, but I can show you some high-level dashboards just so you can get a little bit of a feel for the real thing. So let me, with that, Cheryl, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yep. I stopped sharing.
Awesome, thank you. Oop, I think I need sharing privileges.
You got it.
Awesome, thank you. Perfect. Okay. Can everyone see the dashboard okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Not
Let's try
really. You're going to have to focus. Yeah, if you focus on any section, I'd appreciate you
Yes.
going up the sections. Haley,
Yeah.
old eyes, you gotta,
No, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Yeah, I got the two screens, so I'm just making sure things are showing up correctly. Okay,
Appreciate it.
so here is an example of a page from the PowerSchool dashboard. So there are a couple things I want to highlight here, both good and bad. So one really exciting thing is that the dashboard is able to take all of our data and it syncs nightly. So this is real-time data, which honestly is a little nerve-wracking as a data person because we like to be QCing, like checking all our data before people see it. But I think that the power of making this available in real time outweighs sort of the need for perfectionism on our data. So one of the really cool things about the data in the dashboard is that it provides some aggregate information that give us a snapshot of sort of how students are doing. So right now what you're seeing, this is set to the 24-25 academic year. Obviously, we're not in the new year yet, but this is district-wide. So this summarizes for ELA the percent of course grades that were coded as a D or an F, and not all schools use the A, B, C, D scale. So we've crosswalked it so that it can be a comparable measure. But so we get kind of a high level snapshot about how overall students are doing. I'm not going to filter this again, just for being sensitive, but individual schools can look at their own results. And so, or we could even look at just all high schools and select all of those individual schools to look at the patterns. And the system will automatically update. So you can also, when we look at this, look at different student subgroups. And so, for example, if I want to look at how multilingual students' grades are looking compared to sort of the general, and I guess this is district-wide, takes a second to update. There's a lot of data that's feeding this model, so it sometimes takes a minute to render here. It's going to take extra long just because you're watching, right? It's
Okay, we appreciate the work.
okay, now of course, now it's really just now. I've never had it be this slow, so this is, I may have let me see. I'm gonna try refreshing here. Okay, there we go. All right, it refreshed. So, so again, we have this filter on for multilingual students here, and we see it's a little bit different picture than when we look at the academic performance of this student subgroup. So that's just one example of the way the dashboard can sort of provide us with some insights. There's all sorts of fun, interesting metrics, looking at pass rates, for example, in ELA courses, and there's a math pass rate as well. What I do want to highlight here is your eyes are probably drawn to this graph that has a lot going on, and it's a lot to make sense of. And so one of the challenges we face at this moment in time is just that we do not have standard grading practices across our district. And so it does make it very difficult to look district-wide at course grade data because we don't have a comparable set, and you get these charts that look a little bit, it's a lot. So, I think when Cheryl and I were sort of talking about this session, I shared with her that this is a dilemma for the data team is, how do we address this problem of, when we want to look at our data across buildings, how do we ensure that there's sort of a standard practice so that we can understand the patterns that exist across buildings? So that's just sharing that sort of as an FYI, just so you know, and also it does look a little overwhelming, and I can acknowledge that. The other piece I wanted to share here, and I want to make sure it's switched to me. Just going to show you. So I'll go into our assessment data here, and I'm actually going to switch to, we had the 24-25 data for M-Class didn't pull the end of year results, and we discovered. So anyway, so I'm going to show you the 23-24 year. So here is an example from our assessment board. And so as you'll see across here, these are all different assessments that we administer in the district across different grade levels. And so we'll have all of them in one place, which is really exciting. But, so in this case, I'm pulling up the M-Class assessment. And so what this particular assessment allows us to do is, again, this is district-wide, but individual schools can pull up their own results. And so in this particular assessment, we're able to see the percent of students who are above, at, below, and well below benchmark on the M-Class assessment in the beginning, middle, and end of year. So that's kind of what this, and it's an interactive chart, so you can hone in on specific areas, and it will respond. I'm not going to click, if you click on the bar, it will actually pull up the list of students that fall into that group as well. So that allows for educators to actually see, the students who might need more targeted support. So that's just a little sneak peek. It is still under construction, but we are really making great headway on having this tool available for district leaders, school leaders, and educators in buildings. And so I think, again, there's more that I would love to show you, but for those of you that maybe have access, you can click around, and I can always give you a personal tour. But so with that, that is sort of like the high level summary of our academic performance data. And again, there's a lot that we could look at, and I think the PowerSchool dashboard will enable us to look at a lot of different things. And there's also certain limitations to what we can look at. And sort of naming that and acknowledging it when we think about sort of what do we want to focus on in terms of the metrics. So with that, I'll hand it over, I'm assuming, to Pamela.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Haley, for that robust just description of some of our performance measures. And so now we're going to chat about the portrait of a graduate and the portrait of the school community. Pamela, would you be able to share with us a high-level overview?
Yeah, if you go back to just so people aren't looking at it right away yet. So some of you know all about our portraits, given how important and how instrumental it is in our work. It's important that we make sure that everyone is aware of it and that we keep it at the forefront. So I'll start by sharing their origin just very briefly. So as a district, we recognize that we were not fully meeting the needs of all our students and that we could do more to prepare them for life beyond high school. So in the fall of 2022, the school board passed a resolution calling for the creation of a district-wide vision for high school. This vision would include a common theory of action for all of our schools and would be shaped by input from students, staff, and the community at large. So in response, we set out to define what our role should be in preparing students for their futures, gathering extensive community feedback along the way. So during the 2022-2023 school year, we formed a high school design team that brought together students, parents, educators, the high school principals, the director of Portland Arts and Technology High School, PATS, and the executive director of Portland Adult Education, as well as leaders from USM, SMCC, community partners, and local business leaders. Right, so this was the makeup of our design team. So through focus groups, meetings, and surveys, we collected input from more than 1,000 stakeholders. We also drew on themes that had emerged from recent community engagement efforts, such as in our development of the instructional vision, as well as the equity policy. So the feedback, all of this information helped us identify the skills and the qualities or attributes students needed to thrive after graduation, as well as the conditions for schools that need to be in place, right, to foster and develop these skills and attributes. So we got both skills and attributes needed, as well as the conditions for success to foster those. So if you want to go to the next slide. So then here, our portrait of a graduate highlights the skills and qualities our students need to thrive after high school. Right, so that's what you're seeing there. It's built around 6 pillars. First, being a self-advocate, knowing your needs and speaking up for yourself. A second, a community builder, someone who contributes and works well with others. Third, a lifelong learner, someone who's curious, adaptable, and always growing. Fourth, a skilled communicator, someone who's able to listen, share ideas, and connect with different people. Fifth, a problem solver, someone who's ready to tackle challenges and with creativity and persistence. And then finally, prepared for success. So leaving high school with the knowledge and skills to thrive in college and career and life beyond. So each pillar is broken down into more detailed elements, but together they capture what it means to be truly prepared for the future. So for instance, under prepared for success, students need to have the skills to access resources, as well as make informed financial decisions, which is very important, manage their time, and develop plans to achieve their goals. Let's go down to the portrait of a school community. So just as our portrait of a graduate right, describes what students need to succeed, our portrait of a school community, which you see here, describes the conditions that have to be in place for students to develop these skills. All right, there are 8 pillars here. So this is what needs to be in place in our school, in our district, as well as the community at large. So first, rich and numerous opportunities. Students need a wide range of experiences inside and outside the classroom. Second, a strong focus on building community, where every student feels like they belong. Third, you'll see there a challenging and meaningful curriculum. So work that pushes students to think deeply and connects to their lives. Fourth, instruction that supports each student, meeting learners where they are and helping them grow. And then you see support for each student's future plan. Here, conditions where students, whether that's college, career, and something else, that students are actually prepared for what comes next and their pathway's been supported and they're ready to go. 6, adequate staffing structures and resources. This is because, right, schools can't deliver on these goals without the people and tools that make it happen. So we need to make sure the supports and structures are in place. And then thriving staff is also critical, where educators feel supported, valued, and able to do their best work. And then finally, quality facilities, that's space that's safe and conducive for learning as well. Each of these pillars is broken down further, similar to the portrait of a graduate. And hopefully what you've heard in the presentation right throughout this evening is key pieces that really really spoke to some of these pillars that you see here. So I just want to highlight some key pieces that it's critical to some of the work we're doing. So on focus on building community, under there you'll see that build school structures, teaming, right, and advisory crew staffing that supports all students belonging and being well known. Under instruction that supports each student, have their guarantee access to challenging coursework and support each student to do excellent each year. Under support for each student's future plan, we have support each student in completing a post-secondary plan, right? That's whether that's like applications for a job, licensure, college credits, resumes, interview skills, all the above and more. Then under adequate staffing, structures, and resources, you'll find design structures and assigned staffing so that students who need differentiated support may achieve academic growth that meets standards. Under thriving staff, provide differentiated training and coaching that is relevant to each staff member and their roles, as well as create regular, substantial time for teachers to collaborate. That is so key. And then, right, in quality facilities, we're applying and going after state funds in order to meet our facility needs. So these are just a few of the elements that I've named under the pillars. There's a lot more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Pamela. And what I want to really underscore as you hear about the portrait of the graduate and the portrait of the school community, it's almost like thinking of it in a nested fashion, where the portrait of the graduate is nested in the portrait of the school community. And if you look very closely at some of the objectives or the indicators and elements within, they very much so are nested and aligned to our strategic plan. When we talk about specific goals and indicators and initiatives within the strategic plan, you could point right back to elements of the portrait of the school community that will support each and every student in achieving in a very high way that would help them to meet the elements of the portrait of the graduate. So thank you for that, Pamela. So those were the presentations, and what we can do now is open up for questions. We can definitely go back to any section, and if you'd like to take it section at a time, we could take questions for each section. So I will go back to the first section, which was the presentation overview, and then we could go step by step. Is that okay with the rest of the team and committee?
Yes, I just did, before you start into questions, I just want to thank each and every person who presented, and even if they were just listening and being the background, um, for the quality of the information. This is what we've been asking for, nagging sometimes, and you've been always gracious about it, and we appreciate it. And to end in the one piece with the portrait of graduate, we don't hear a lot about that, but in that has, if you're looking at elementary level 2-1 ELA, that is necessary for the portrait of the graduate outcome. So I think all of these things
Oh,
are
yeah.
tied up. So I'll ask, does any Zach or there you go, Usa, thank you. What would you like to know?
I just wanted to ask about the academic performance platform. So with the percentages, like, is there an option to click in and like find out what the percentage represents and what it's telling you?
Yes. So each of the dashboards have a metrics card that explains how the visualization is constructed. So yes, all the underlying queries are visible for anyone who wants to nerd out and understand how we put them together.
Okay. Also, you mentioned that that like complicated data was due to not a standard way of grading or across the schools. So have there been any discussions how to maybe help with that, or can the platform be, I guess, specific for each school's grading system? Not system, but like, practices.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really appreciate that because it is important for us to really examine our current practice when it comes to grading. It's going to be important for us to understand how those practices are equitable, how grading practices are timely, because grades also, if you use them well and are able to give students the information in a timely way, it's one way of also giving students feedback or giving families feedback so that there is sufficient time for students to understand what they're doing well, where it is that they are can make some improvements so that overall improvements can be made. And then, to ensure, that equity piece. So we are looking at, this is a perfect platform in this committee to have some discussions, to internally explore, and then externally through this committee, have some conversations about how we can improve our practices.
I really appreciate that. One last question. So who is it, every, not administrator, but like every teacher who has access to this information and data, or is it school specific?
So it is based on infinite campus permissions, and every teacher, building leader, guidance counselors, administrative assistants, district leaders, it's quite a wide range of users, but it's all tied back to the infinite campus permissions. So it's really based on which students are rostered to an individual. So the teacher view actually looks very different than the district view, and even a principal's view looks different than like a central office administrator. So it's all sort of configured based on your role, and trying to be in compliance with FERPA.
Thank you so much.
Great. Maya, I think Member Melina.
Yes, board member Ali just asked my question, so I'm good. Thank you.
Well, listen, I also thought there were several questions that you asked, Member Ali. Anyone else have any questions before I go through my?
So what I'd like to do is, as I'm going to go back to the top of the presentation, and we could, sometimes people don't know what questions they have because they've kind of taken in so much. So if we go from the top, we could go section by section to see if there are any other data review questions. And this includes any questions that you may have. Um, Member Opperman.
Yes. Anybody else? Because I do have questions. One is related to Yusra's comment on what do those percentages mean? I guess, Haley, as we look at the percentages on, changes in percentages from one part of the year to the next or 1 year to the next, there's two parts to that. I was wondering, what is the statistical significance of those changes? I mean, they are there. We can see the numbers, but are they, how significant are those differences? And I guess the other piece is when you see that change of 0.9%, or whatever, it is, how many kids is that? It's how many ed techs do we need to, I mean, because I'm looking at it, not just, are they real, but which they are, but how real are they? And how do we then say how many in the budget committee, how many people do we need to really focus on interventions in these various areas? So I guess, can you tell us what's a percent mean in people?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to answer the first or second part of your question first, which is I don't know the number of students off the top of my head. So that's something I would have to just look up for you. So I can't answer that right now. As far as looking at the percentage change, we cannot say with confidence that these changes are statistically significant because this is not, it's not an experimental design. So it is a trend data. There are some statistical analyses that could be done to look at, we have not done even like a t-test, we're not running statistical analyses on these, but for us, we are looking at sort of overall trends. It's sort of we're trying to ascribe to a philosophy of good enough evidence because I think the researcher in me is tuned in with you, which is, is this statistically significant? But I think when we're thinking about progress monitoring and looking at are we going in the right direction, I think trend data can still be really important for us. And in particular, as we introduce new elements into the ecosystem, so when we bring in a new curriculum or when we have a new academic intervention that we're implementing, we might see sort of spikes in our trends, and that is really important. And again, we can't say it's causal, but I think to sort of obsess over that, I'm trying to let go of that because I think the trend is really important to pay attention to too. So know that I do think about those things, and I'm always wondering about how we can have more causal evidence in the conversation. But I think the trends are still worthy of celebration. And again, in education, a 5 percentage point gain is pretty hard to find absent any intervention. And so I think I would suspect that that is not just random chance, but I did not run a statistical analysis to confirm.
I appreciate that, Haley. And I think if you notice, Yusra's hand went up, and if Mickey was here, she would also be here. Where this committee is, everyone on the committee has a science background and with statistics. So that's why those kinds of questions come up. And you're correct. I agree with you on the trends as we go. But as we answer questions, and as I go to, like I say, to the other committee I'm on, the finance committee, and say, hey, and I'm sure the team will make suggestions on who and where, but we can say that because we can explain in budget time that we see this need and what it means to kids. I think that's the piece of it. We are talking, all these numbers have to do with individuals who are trying to and they and their families trying to maximize their accomplishments in their lives. And so I think it's a back and forth between we can say, but we feel pretty good about this, and that it means this in the other context. And so I think that's really kind of important. Before I hand it back to you, Sarah, actually, I'll let you go, and then I go back because I have more things on the beginning part, but go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just gonna follow up on your comment. So when school administrators or leaders look at these data, is there a plan to discuss what is going wrong, like what needs improvement, what areas that can be worked on, and how's that conversation looking like?
So I'll give one specific example of a process that was introduced at our June retreat. And so we engaged in a root cause analysis protocol. And it comes from the world of improvement science, with the idea behind it being that, the problem statement that you're focused on most likely has a number of root causes, a number of factors that are contributing to the outcome that you're seeing. And so the root cause analysis protocol, and we use something called the fishbone diagram, prompts leaders to really unpack the why behind the outcome that they're seeing. And so that's a protocol that we introduced in June, we revisited in August, and we'll continue to sort of use that philosophy to guide our continuous improvement and data reviews throughout the year ahead.
Is that good enough?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Excellent. And before I go on and make more, I've got 10 questions.
So do you want to move to the next section, or do you want to
No,
stay?
I actually want to. I do want to. stay where we are, we'll go back to the mission measure section and noting the gaps seem to be in math, then moving that into tying that piece into the programs in math. And I'll jump to you, Jesse Robinson, that I know in reading studies, and we've changed our way of looking at reading. We're back to including some foundational things like CKLA does. But the question I have is in the math, there's also a discussion. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our elementary program is inquiry based, which is great. And inquiry is a wonderful thing. But there is some that question, which is it related to direct instruction, and maybe just the applicant can comment on this. It seems to be a discussion between standard education and special education needs. And I don't know how we're balancing that. Is that a question that could be answered at another time, Jesse and Jesse? Or
I can address that. Just that during the review, we'll be looking at our curriculum, which is a problem-based curriculum. And so it really addresses conceptual understanding side of the mathematics.
Very good. I have no argument on that. Yeah.
But I think that there is room for improvement on the procedural fluency side. And so I do feel like that is going to be a discussion that we'll address during our review sessions. So that's definitely something that is on my mind. In terms of something that might, there might be some sort of supplemental resource that we talk about that could be used. We also would really like to have a comprehensive assessment system for math in K-5. We use curriculum-based assessments now, and obviously we use the main 3-year, but I think we want to have more of an interim-based or benchmark-based assessment as well, like we do in literacy. And so that would also bring up where students might have some gaps in their procedural fluency. So I think that might answer your question, but
that does, and it's an awesome thing to hear too, because I see with that information there going on on the same. Again, I'll give anybody else on the board that wants to say anything, but like I said, my question then is still in math, and I'm going to jump to middle school math and ask Allison I guess my question on that in great improvements in many things, but what is our curriculum in math in middle school?
So the middle school does use Amplified Desmos. The journey was illustrative mathematics, had a scope and sequence. Desmos used the same scope and sequence, but had a different interface. And then Desmos was bought by Amplify. So that brings us to Amplified Desmos. And I want to agree with everything that Jesse said, and I'm excited about this redesign process as an opportunity to dig in and see where did the decisions we made in the past have strengths, and where did they have gaps across those like conceptual understanding, procedural fluency pieces. And then also I'm echoing what Jesse said. I think this also provides us an opportunity with aligning curriculum instruction, meaning how the teacher is actually teaching that curriculum, and then supports and assessment, because sometimes those supports, the people providing those supports haven't had an opportunity yet to have like a deep understanding of the classroom instruction and curriculum. So I'm just I think Amplified Desmos, has brought us from a place of total Wild West to alignment, but I'm excited about this opportunity to go dig in and really deepen our alignment.
Yeah, well, I think it's awesome. I think with Cheryl, encouraging you all, we're gonna be doing really, really well on that. Okay, so here's another piece that's probably data, but it's not in there, and this is it's not presented, and I guess it's a broad picture idea, is we've got all this data on academic and social, and we aren't talking social emotional here, but it does Power School or all of the SIS or whatever we do, can we can at and in the Power School board identify parallels between a person's behavioral issues and the particular academic issue they may be having? Because not always, but so often part of the behavioral issue is just a complete frustration with what's going on academically. And not all of it, but that's a piece. And I wondered how are we doing on that? And anybody can answer the question they want to, if they want to.
I'll chime in, and if others want to add, that's great. So as far as the social emotional piece, so we do have behavior data in Power School, and so one of the really interesting features I think about the Power School dashboard is it allows for sort of automated or drag and drop crosstabs. So what that means is you can look at correlational data points based on two different metrics. So you could look to see if there's a correlation between, for example, a student's academic performance and the frequency of behavioral incidents that are documented in Power School. And you can even take that a step further to say, is there a correlation also associated with some demographic characteristic? The one complicating factor is that there's other social emotional data that we collect, things like the student survey, that are not collected in a way where we can map it directly to the student's profile. And so one thing we're exploring is looking at some of the metrics we have around culture and climate as treating them almost like characteristics of a building that we could then layer in sort of like a mediator, a moderator in your model to say, you know, in the same way that we can disaggregate by student subgroup, you could also look at sort of characteristics of a school. So we're exploring that because I think it would be a really interesting research question to explore, but I do think that crosstabs offer one little window into some of that correlational data.
Awesome. I guess only last question is, excuse me, is for me anyway, has to do with who has access to Power School. Will this committee get readouts on a regular basis on this? As part of we have an ongoing calendar, and in there,
Yeah.
how's that going to go?
Yeah, so Power Schools is access is sensitive to certain staff as needed. In this, just as we've done this evening, for the purpose of this committee, we will bring data, relevant data for our discussions and our updates. And as it is, you know, guided through our agenda and agenda setting, so that we can always have conversations about data that's happening in the district and being very transparent and clear about what we're seeing in the data. And so that's kind of how we will use data in this committee setting. But Power Schools access is dictated, you know, similarly through Infinite Campus by classification, staff classification, as we have to hold our data secure.
Privacy
Yeah.
matters a lot in this whole piece and all, and it's and that is critically important. But that's good to know, and I hear back from all of you, and we'll ask you 100 more questions again, as I do appreciate all of your patience with this. I'm asking whether Member O'Brien or Member Lee, what's your reaction, if you have one?
And if you'd like to go back to any section, I was trying to go section by section, but you know, as the conversation is emerging, just let me know if you'd like to go back to any particular section for your questions. And yeah, yeah.
I should have raised my hand or something. I didn't have quite as many thoughts as maybe I was hoping to have, but my one question that I did have was about what was done with ELA at the middle school level that led to that increase in the percentage of students who were meeting the targets there.
Good question. Very good question.
Yeah, I can take that. I don't have as technical language as Haley, but Haley, we would say it's a trend, not a, we can't say it's causal yet. But there's been a lot of work that went on in the middle school. So some teachers are on year 2, some year 3, some year 4 of implementing this curriculum. So they are, first of all, this curriculum covers all of the standards that are needed in middle school, which, like, just to say, back in the day when it was all teacher created materials in middle school, we didn't necessarily know or have the ability to pinpoint when certain standards would be covered in the curriculum, and now we do. So that's one piece. And then teachers meet together to unpack the materials and figure out how to teach them well. So they're sharing their professional expertise with each other, sharing ideas. Um, and then we do, I'm not even going to cover all the pieces, but I'll just cover some highlights. And then me and the instructional coaches and the principals and the assistant principals are going in and doing walkthroughs to see how it's going. And by looking at those trends of how it's going, we're then offering professional development and supports to teachers, both in celebrating what's going well and also saying, like, we see this as a need for support. And so we're providing, professional training in the pieces. So that's all been going on. And then the next piece, which we're excited to layer in, is a more, I don't want to suggest that teachers haven't been looking at student work all along. They have, but we're going to get more systematic in how we're looking at student work in that curriculum. So yeah, those are a few pieces of the curriculum implementation process.
What does being more systematic in how you're looking at student work look like?
So there are literal protocols that we are using. So each day in the class, the student is producing some work aligned to a standard. So that would be like a classroom formative assessment, something that they wrote or said or did. Then there's a mid-unit assessment and an end-of-unit assessment. So those are all different sort of layers of times at which we're getting visual evidence or spoken evidence of what students know and are able to do. And so the systematic piece comes as when those teachers come together, they're actually bringing that data together and saying, man, like, if there's a Greek and Roman root, our students know it and they can figure it out. But when we ask them to, like, translate figurative language into, like, to produce meaning out of figurative language, they're falling flat. So let's keep doing the stuff we're doing about Greek and Roman roots, but let's try something different or new when it comes to, like, figurative language. That might be a conversation that would emerge from the systematic look at how student data is happening. So they're really aligning tangible evidence of what students know and did to the standards they're hoping that they'll be able to have, and then adapting their instruction based on what they're seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It just got me thinking about how I do not know any Greek or Latin roots, really. So maybe I need to work on that standard. But
Let's talk. We can talk anytime about that.
He's a senior, my dear. So, anything else from anybody else? This has been really a great moment. And I expect, Pamela, we'll see you more because as we talk, because I've been talking to some people about middle school and thinking about what you're done and with middle school thinking. So it's kind of exciting. Caroline, look all good? Ready for school? Great. Zach, likewise. Super. Anything else from any of the other members? Well, I would then say thank you. And I would ask that I have a motion for adjournment. So moved and seconded. And actually, students, you may vote in committee. And it really counts. So don't gang up on us, okay? But that's one of the cases. So all in favor of adjournment? Awesome. Thanks again. Thank you, Cheryl, very much. And
Thank you, everyone.
You were awesome. Take care.
It was so good to see you, and thank you for participating. Thank you to the team. Great job.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks.
Good night.